Hi, in this lecture, I will show you some basic window functions. Window functions are a family of functions. It's not a specific function, but rather a special set of functions that perform a calculation across a set of table rows that are somehow related to the current row. It is comparable to the type of calculation that can be done with an aggregate function. But unlike regular aggregate functions, you can use a window function and not cause rows to become grouped into a single output row. Each single row retains their separate identities. Behind the scenes, the window function actually processes more than just the current row of the query results. In this lecture, I want to show you how to write a window function with average, min, max, and sum. Let's take a look at an example. In this first example, I want to compare each movie DVD's replacement cost to the average replacement cost of all the movies that from the same MPAA ratings. For those of you who are not based in the United States, MPAA rating is a film rating system in the United States to rate a movie's appropriateness for certain audiences based on its content. For example, capital letter G means all ages can be admitted into this movie watching, and PG-13 might contain some materials that could be inappropriate for children under 13 years old. A couple of things to notice in this SQL query. You have seen the average function before, but in this query there's no group by clause. How does the SQL engine know which rows to use to compute the average from? It's actually the partition by clause inside of the over function. The partition by rating means we're computing the average for each unique value of the same rating. And in the final output, every row has the average cost inside of the same rating. So you can also do things like replacement cost for that movie divided by the average cost, so to get relative expenses for each movie comparing to the other movies inside of the same rating. And if you wanted to try out this example by yourself, please feel free to go to SQLpad's playground and play with it yourself until you get comfortable with it. I've included the code of the queries in this lecture's documentation. Feel free to try it out yourself. Let's take a look at another example. In this example, I wanted to compare any movie's length to the maximum length of a movie that belongs to the same movie category. It's very similar to the previous example, but instead of using average, I'm combining max with over and partition to create a window function so I compute the maximum movie length inside of the same movie category. So for example, for the first movie, Story Side, its length is 163 minutes, and the maximum length of any action movie is 185 minutes. If I divide 163 to 185, I can sort of get a sense of how long this specific movie is comparing to other movies inside of the same category. Let's take a look at another example, which is the final example in this lecture. This one is actually quite complicated. In this example, I wanted to calculate a running sum of the movie length using the window function. Assuming it's holiday season and I want to binge watch all of the 1000 movies, starting from movie ID equals 1. After finish every movie, I want to find out what my overall progress is. I'm using sum and over to calculate a running total of time to get my overall progress. And this pattern could happen a lot at work, and the overall progress could be a very useful metric to have. Notice that there's no partition by clause inside of the over function, because I'm not grouping those movies into any subcategories. I simply wanted to compute my overall progress. That's why I'm not partitioned by any groups or category of those movies. And another thing to notice is that if I don't add anything inside of the over function, I'm actually getting the total number of minutes from the entire movie catalog. As you might notice that they all have the same value of 115267. But if I add the order by clause inside of the over function, I actually get the total number of minutes up to that specific row, which we call it running total. Again, if you're not super comfortable with this query and feel like this query is a bit of outlandish, feel free to go to SQLPad's playground and use the attached code until you get very comfortable with this example. Now it's time to do some exercises. In this lecture, I've prepared 4 exercises. I also try to give more detailed instructions for every exercise. You might find those exercises a bit harder to solve comparing to our previous exercises, since you might be relatively new to window functions. But don't worry, if you're really stuck at a certain problem, I will show you my step-by-step solutions in the next lecture. See you in the next lecture.